Kirsten is in the doctor's kitchen today talking about 3 fermented vegetable recipes that you need to have in your life and in your repertoire for your kitchen to improve your gut health. First of all, we have our fennel chutney with dandelion and apple, beet celery fermented salad, and the easiest recipe of them all, a garlic honey. Fermented foods are fantastic for your overall well-being, and Kirsten is going to teach us about how it releases more nutrients from your food. It is super cheap and it will look after that population of microbes that live in and around our body. You're going to want to watch all recipes. Doctor's Kitchen. Recipes, health, lifestyle. Kirsten, thank you so much for coming to the kitchen. We're super excited to go through some of the ferments from your book.
Let's start with the garlic and the honey.
Tell me what I need to do.
You'll want to just give each clove just a tiny crush.
Okay.
So the reason that you're crushing the garlic just a little bit is you want to release the moisture. So honey is full of microbes that ferment, as well as garlic, but the honey is brilliantly stable. So we're disrupting the moisture content, and as soon as we do that, it gives the lactobacillus what it needs to get started.
And the lactobacillus is in the honey itself, or is it?
It's in both.
Is that the dominant species, would you say?
And that's what we're going to work with today is lactobacillus, what's called lactic acid fermentation.
Yeah.
So lactobacillus is responsible for a lot of things we love. It's responsible for all our pickles and our vegetables, and it's that sour flavor. And it's also, for those that are nervous about fermentation, like with vegetables, it's the superpower. It's what makes the food safe. Some people think it's the salt, but it's actually acid that's created with the process. So we do our fermentation, the lactobacillus gets in there, and it starts eating the sugar.
Okay.
And as it does so, it does a couple things. One is obviously it's eating that sugar so that we're not. It's pre-digesting those starches that we can't digest so that they're more bioavailable, and it's creating acid. And it's that acid that makes it safe. So what we're doing, what used to be done is wild fermentation. In other words, whoever's here is going to do the job for us. And when people want to control it, then they'll add a culture, they'll add that.
Gotcha. I know that people get worried about using raw honey from that perspective, particularly as you can't taste when it is affected. So how do we know that everything's safe in this?
Botulism thrives in anaerobic environment, which these ferments, we want to make them in an anaerobic environment. They actually don't really care. The lactobacillus doesn't care, but it thrives also. But where garlic got its bad reputation is people were doing garlic in olive oil, and it was just making the ideal situation because there was nothing to acidify that garlic.
Okay.
And so any botulism that might have been on there could start to grow.
Gotcha. So garlic and oil, that's a no?
You don't want to do that, no.
Okay. If I fermented this on the counter for a couple of weeks and I've got it to the point where I want it, do I then have to keep that in the refrigerator, or can it stay on the counter at a good, simple, like a normal room temperature?
I keep my vegetable ferments in the refrigerator because that stops the fermentation.
Gotcha.
Not stops, slows it way down.
Okay,
So the microbes are comfortable where we're comfortable. And so on the counter, they're going to be doing their thing, which is consuming those starches, making acid. And they'll keep having that party and keep producing more microbes until it's all gone. So now you're going to do something really tricky. You're going to pour that honey. And you're going to go about 3/4 up.
3/4
leave
up.
some space.
Okay. And does this have to be a particular type of honey?
Yeah, you want a raw honey. Again, want those microbes to be alive and active. And we'll give this a minute to sink down in there.
And so you want it to be raw, so unpasteurized, so it's not been taken to that high temperature where you've killed off those microbes in this honey.
And then you're just going to put the lid on and tighten it.
Okay.
For the next month or 3 weeks or so, this one takes a little longer than the regular vegetables. You're just going to turn it upside down here and there. I usually do it, for a few hours every day. I'll leave it this way, and then I'll
turn it back up to that.
And it's because the garlic wants to float on the top, and you want to be able to keep that. Now, right now, it's kind of cool. It's like a lava lamp, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's just moving slowly at that honey pace. But what's going to happen in the next few days, because you've crushed those garlic, it's going to get a little more liquidy.
Okay.
And it's going to start bubbling like crazy. And that's part of why we've left that space.
Right, okay.
The other thing, before you turn it over, is you're going to give it a quick burp.
Oh, okay.
Just that much.
Every day?
While it's active, yeah. This is all sugar, and so those microbes are going to be super, super active.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, they've got a lot of food to eat.
That's great. All right,
Yeah, so that's ready.
Shall I show you the one that we did?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you can critique it.
Here it comes.
For us. So this is one that we did on the 10th of, was it 10th of April? What do you think?
Well, it looks great. Yeah, look and see.
So it's so much more liquidy.
So much more liquidy.
Yeah.
And was it super bubbly? No. Well, usually, but you may or may not, depending on how much sugar is in them. I mean, it smells like fermented garlic to me.
Yeah. Oh wow. Oh my gosh. It smells like roasted sweet garlic.
And that's
man,
the
that's so
flavor.
good.
That's the flavor you're gonna get.
Try that with my. Can I just dive in like with it's not
Oh
gonna.
yeah, go for it. That's the beauty of this ferment. You've got two things. You've got this honey you can use. Drizzle it on whatever. I mean, I've chopped this up and put it on pizza.
Yeah, I was gonna say pizza.
After it's cooked, just as a finishing touch.
Yeah. That is really good.
That's really good.
Doctor's Kitchen. Recipes, health, lifestyle. What should we do next?
Let's do Be Good to Your Gut.
Be good to your gut, fennel chutney.
Yeah, and this is a recipe I developed with the idea of prebiotics in mind. Probiotics are live microbes. They are the microbes that are alive and that live in our gut. If they don't live in our gut, then they're not considered a probiotic. So for example, we were talking about the microbes that ferment. Acid bacteria is what makes the sour in vinegar, and it is a bacteria. It isn't probiotic for us because it doesn't live in our guts and on us. But if you're a fruit fly, it's a probiotic because it lives in them and on them.
I did not know that.
Because you needed that fun fact, right? Prebiotics are the food for them. And I think that's the thing that's come out in the last few years that people are learning is you can take probiotic pills all day long, but if you're not eating fiber, if you're not putting anything in your gut to feed them, it's not going to do you any good.
Not going to do any good. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the idea with this ferment is that there's also fiber, there's inulin, which is a resistant starch that our microbes love.
How do you want me to chop the fennel?
Both of these are dry ferments, so we're going to ask the salt and the liquid that's in our vegetables to create the brine.
Gotcha.
So in this case, we need to slice as thin as possible.
Okay.
Because we want to have as much surface area for that salt to get in there and release the brine.
When it comes to the salt and the salting of this, there's
that's great.
is there a rule of thumb?
Baking sourdough and all of those things.
Sure.
And making alcohol, you have a lot, and cheese making, you have a lot more rules as far as the specificity of how much. With lactic acid fermentation, it's pretty great because the lactobacillus has a pretty high salt tolerance. So what is the salt for? The salt does a couple things. One is lactobacillus doesn't mind the salt, but some of the other microbes that we don't want in there do. So it gives it the upper hand.
Gotcha.
So when we put in the salt, we're saying we're really choosing lactobacillus to be the main ferment here.
Okay.
That's the first step of the salt. The other thing that the salt does is it hardens the pectin in the cell walls, and so it keeps our crisp. And so if you have made a ferment and it's too soft, but it tastes fine, it's nice and acidic, it's probably just not had enough salt in it.
Right, okay.
And
I didn't know
then-
that about salt and the pectin.
Yeah, and then of course salt tastes good, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing the salt does is it controls the fermentation. With the microbes, it's not just like there's one little type of lactobacillus. There's a bunch. And they each kind of have their day in the sun. It's a succession. So the first one that moves in, the less acidic environment, and they're the ones that start to bring it down. And then they bring it down too much and they die off, and the next one moves in. And so it's this sort of this succession, and they each add their own flavor stamp, if you will. So if it's really hot, you will put more salt in. Then you will need that 2 to 3% to kind of slow that down so that it ferments properly. This is not going to happen to most people, but in an industrial setting, what can happen is if that fermentation goes too fast, like say on a pickle or something that's a larger vegetable, what can happen is the whole outside can acidify too quickly and bring that acid level down and kill off the microbes before they have a chance to acidify fully through.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
And so that's why when people are like, well, why would I want to slow it down? I just get to eat it sooner,
right? Yeah.
But like I said, this isn't something that really would be a concern in most homes.
Sure.
It's sort of a flavor thing, right? Because if you have that nice succession, you're going to get a little more depth of flavor.
So in terms of the hierarchy, if there is such a thing of when you're eating fermented vegetables, are there labels that you should be looking for on the jar? If you're not going to do this at home, obviously, which you can, it's very easy. But if you're just going to the stores, what are the things that people should be looking for?
Don't get it, on the shelves. Go to the refrigerator section.
Okay, refrigerated.
You don't want to see vinegar in there, because if there's vinegar in there, acetic acid is stronger, if you will, or whatever. It will kill off the lactic acid. So we know that lactic acid will no longer be active. So it might still be delicious and wonderful and have postbiotics, but you won't have the probiotics.
Okay.
Let's add our ginger.
Yeah.
You don't need a whole lot, just like a tablespoon or two.
Oh, a
depending
tablespoon.
on how much ginger you love.
I am a ginger fan.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so just a teaspoon or two. Yeah, this is really just packing in lots of digestive ingredients with these different properties, like fennel seed and
then the turmeric's for the inflammation.
Gotcha.
In the book, with recipes for people that cook that way, have it all measured out.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to show you how to add the salt to taste.
Oh, to taste, so without measuring or anything.
Yeah. If you want to follow a recipe, then you do that. If you want to know that you're getting 1.5% or 2% or whatever you choose as your salt ratio, then what you would do is at this point, with these wet ingredients, you'd measure it.
Okay.
And you'd weigh it. If you're doing it to taste, you're going to just start with just a couple of teaspoons.
Do you want me to massage it?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just get in there and take out all your stress and frustrations.
I'm feeling very calm this morning. You have a very calm aura around you, Kirsten. Everything's sort of relaxed, no need to measure. I love it. This is a really good stress reliever, actually. And is it true, like, depending on the person who's actually making ferment, like, it can impart different flavors because of the microbes and and stuff?
So many cultures believe that.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense. And there are people that, that won't let other people touch their ferments, because they're like, no. So this looks great. So now you're going to taste it.
Okay.
How's the salt?
Tastes salty.
Like way too salty?
No,
or
not too salty. Just like really nicely salted.
So that's what you're going for. You want to taste the salt, you want to know it's there, and you want it to be pleasing, like a chip that you can't stop eating.
Yeah.
So we're gonna just add these guys.
How do you want to? Do you want to chop these or?
Chop those up.
Yeah.
Rip them.
Rip them, yeah.
They're able to eat. Okay, so we're gonna put in about a tablespoon of these.
Tablespoon? Yeah. I'm just gonna do by eye.
That's fine.
Tablespoon.
And then a little black pepper, because just do. So now taste it again. I always taste.
This looks amazing already. Like, I can imagine just having this on the side of whatever I'm eating as a.
So I always like to taste just to make sure I've got my seasonings.
The seasoning is spot on. Tastes slightly more salty now for some reason. I don't know why. Whether the other ingredients have changed the flavor profile in some way, but delicious. And again, no, just clean jars, no need to sterilize or anything.
And then when you get a little in, just kind of press as you go.
I don't think I can fit my hand in there.
If I can.
Walk around with a
I'll
jar.
press.
Yeah, you can press. Can you ferment in anything other than glass jars? Like if you had a stainless steel?
It doesn't need to be airtight. It does need to be not reactive material.
Okay.
So people do ferment in like stainless steel that is the high quality stainless steel that I guess there's some qualities that will still rust on you.
Gotcha.
So yeah, any vessel that isn't ceramic is very traditional.
Oh yeah. Does light affect the quality of the ferment as well?
You don't want to leave it in a sunny window because it's going to warm it up and change the fermentation. But the light itself isn't really a huge problem they found. So
you're really packing it down there, right?
That's the important part, is that you have that brine that comes over.
Okay.
over the top. If you see air pockets and you really can't squeeze out the air pockets, that's when it gets to be an issue.
Okay.
So now we've sealed it.
It's like some alien form coming out of it. Yeah, I love it.
And this will all get thrown away. We've sealed it.
Yeah.
And again, you're just gonna, that's enough to let that oxygen out and keep that CO2. Or you can pull this.
You do this every day? Developing it, would you say?
Just in that first, probably won't need it till tomorrow or the next day even.
Oh, okay.
People always ask, how do you know when it's done? And that's one way. You can see that it starts to look a little bit translucent, a little bit cooked.
Right.
Everything's melded together. And then the other way is the smell. It's going to smell pickly and acidic.
Oh, completely different.
Oh yeah, nice
Yeah.
and acidic.
That tastes better than the 8-pounder little jar sauerkraut that I buy from the health food store. I've been wasting my money. That is so good.
Doctor's Kitchen. Recipes, health, lifestyle.
Yeah, beet celery fermented
Oh, there you
salad.
go. Beet celery fermented salad. Okay, so I'm guessing it's got beets and celery in it?
Yeah, that's a good guess. These beets, we have to have them thin for a couple reasons. When it ferments, it's not going to soften a whole lot.
Okay.
If these beets are much thicker than this, they're not going to have a really nice mouthfeel. But shredded, they'd be great. Chunked, they'd just be hard and not tasty.
Point.
You can completely change the flavor and the dynamic of what you're making by how you chop it.
And I think, you know, the first time the book was released, there's just been like this huge wave of interest, not only from the public, but from the research point of view as well. I mean, you have the Sonnenbergs, who I'm sure you've come across at Stanford, who wrote that book around gut health, and their recent study, I think, at Stanford, and it was a cross-collaborative study with another researcher, Chris Gardner, looking at fermented vegetables, in addition to high-fiber vegetables, found that fermented vegetables an improved outcome in terms of microbial diversity. It was a relatively small study, but like super interesting, that you're getting these additional benefits from fermented food other than just high fiber.
Industrialization of our foods, we were moved into it by the companies and taught that our homemade foods, you know, or our breads were dangerous or whatever. And so, you know, there were just so many things at play. And some of it had to happen. I mean, some of the things were a problem, but it all got thrown out. And I think now we're just finally bringing them back.
Yeah.
Lost them completely, which is good. Vitamin C is actually higher in a fermented food than in the fresh vegetable, and I think that's fascinating.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's crazy cool. I'll let you start salting that.
I'd probably be doing like a tablespoon and a half of this for this weight. But I'm gonna undersalt what I think is undersalting, and then add more if I need to. This is actually a nice sort of recipe to sort of compare with the fennel, because the beet is clearly a lot harder. It's a lot more rigid here, so yeah, this is a lot more challenging, I would say. Is that cloves?
Cloves.
Oh, that's cloves.
Already,
okay. Already pounded. I'm a fermenter. Yeah. Again, it's already got that texture and flavor that I could just have this on the side of a meal as like a little pickle.
Like if you're just looking in your fridge and creating a recipe out of, you know, stuff that you know that you're not going to use before, that's exactly what you're saying, is just make something you know will be good raw.
Yeah.
And it'll be amazing fermented.
I think viewers will probably know the difference between a quick pickle and a ferment, but how would you define?
That's a very common question.
Yeah.
A pickle, let's define what a pickle is. A pickle is something that has been acidified. That's why you'll see like pickled pig's feet or something. It's because it's been acidified and preserved through acidification. A pickle can be made out of fermentation, or a pickle can be made with vinegar or some other acid dumped into it. Everything we're doing, all fermentation, is pickling.
Okay.
But not all pickles are fermented. And so when I'm talking about a vinegar pickle or a canned pickle or something, fermentation, everything will turn into that safe level. And officially it's 4.6 or below. But anytime it smells pickly, you're gonna be at 4.6 or below.
Okay.
Look at that.
That's amazing.
Isn't that color
Yeah.
beautiful?
That's gorgeous.
But the same thing as before. You're gonna just burp it as needed, and in a few weeks, or a week and a half. I would taste it as soon as it smells acidic.
Yeah.
Which is probably going to be in the next week or two.
Great. Well, I'm going to show you one that we made in the kitchen a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so we get asked that question a lot. Why do some things get alcoholic and some things not? And in fact, in like a beet ferment, there's so much sugar, so it could get a little boozy. And when you taste that booziness in a lactic acid ferment, call that funky. Like we'll say, oh, that has a funky taste, or it has a yeasty taste. That will be because yeasts moved in. So yeasts will ferment to alcohol, and when you have vegetables that have lots of sugar, the yeast and the lactic acid are kind of battling for who's going to get the sugar. And if the lactic acid wins, which is why we put salt in, it gets more lactic. If the yeast wins, even with salt, if there's a strong population, that's when things will start being funky or boozy. Yeah, so that's what's going on there. And that's why kombucha, it has yeast and lactic acid and acetic acid and a bunch of other guys in there. And that's why kombucha can get alcoholic as well. And even, water kefir can have a tiny bit of alcohol, is because especially these ones that we're using for drinks have yeast in them. So why is alcohol not considered good for us? I think, a lot of that is how we drink it.
Yeah.
Now it's just so much higher levels. Back throughout history, alcohol was consumed because it was safer than the water. This part of the world, cider, was given to kids also. They also made what they called ciderkin, which was or they'd water it down. But the ciderkin is you take that pressing and you add water to it and you press again and you're getting a lower alcohol level.
Gotcha.
And so I think, a lot of these fermented beverages that were traditional, alcohol wants to become vinegar. When we put this in the fridge, we're stopping it at a spot, but it'll keep going to done, which is like back to water and mineral and dirt and everything that it came from. And so alcohol is the same way, and I think historically it was really hard to get a high level of alcohol. Like it started out as a fruit fermented, the sugars fermented to a light alcohol, and then it became alcohol, and the acetic acid's moving in right away. And so you're already getting kind of these sour drinks, and so that alcohol level is, do you know what I mean? And now we distill it. We've created yeasts that can tolerate much higher alcohol levels, and we fortify it with more sugar or whatever to get these drinks. And so I think that's in the mix, and it just gets to be too much for our bodies and our livers.
Dose makes the poison. Do we try this one?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. This looks completely different as well. You could tell it's like all mushed down, isn't it? Yeah. And it smells
nice and
wonderful.
acidic.
Yeah. That is so tangy. That's delicious. It's almost like got a slight fizz in my mouth. This has been awesome. Do you want to try these? Yeah. Come on. There's a lot of pepper going on in that.
The cloves gives it a little extra bite. That one.
That is gorgeous.